Oh, yes, children, you are dismissed. So first of all, I just want to say thank you to everyone for all of the love and support, the wonderful, beautiful tributes that have been made on Facebook pages, and family has been very touched, and family's been reading those and coming to tears, and it's just been very sweet and such a blessing. We had John's graveside service on Friday. Because of the COVID restrictions, we were only allowed to have 50 people present, and there's 32 people in our family alone, just with our children and their spouses and grandchildren. And so John's siblings also joined us there, and it was a very sweet service. So that you all know, he's buried now at Riverside Memorial Park in the lawn right next to John G. Lake's gravesite, and right just across from where Gabe is buried, so very close. We also wanted to let you know that we're going to be having a large memorial service on Saturday, July 11th. We probably would have done it this week, but with 4th of July weekend, we realized that that would just be a really difficult weekend for people to commit to. And so we're going to have the service on July 11th at 2 o'clock, and it's going to be at Lake City Church, which is in Coeur d'Alene. And I know some of you are questioning, why would you not have it here? One, because we know there's a lot of people, and we probably would need more space than this. And then secondly, because Idaho is further along in their COVID restrictions, then we're able to accommodate a lot more people. And my brother-in-law is good friends with the pastor there, and he offered his church to us at no cost. And so we're very blessed to be having that service on the 11th, and hopefully you will all join us. There'll be more information on that coming. Next, I just want to say, this is all before I get into my message, but you all know John's heart for the church and how much he loved each and every one of you so much. And he loved Zion. He loved what the Lord was doing here. You know, in January, he declared 2020 as the year of God's rule and reign, and that doesn't change. That's been his declaration. That's what he knows that the Lord showed him for this year. And we have to remember that despite all of the suddenness of John's leukemia diagnosis at the end of January, to all of the COVID stuff and the COVID restrictions and our stand for healing and the joy when we got the complete remission announcement, and then the sadness of that being followed so quickly by the return of the sickness and the suddenness of his passing. John would want us all to continue to fight and to believe for healing and for miracles. He would want us to be a great people of faith, and that we would not shrink back. We would not shrink back, even though the outcome was not what we hoped for, not what we expected, not what we believed for, that he would want us to keep pressing in and believing for miracles to happen, for healing to come, and that this would continue to be the year of God's rule and reign in all things. And so I know a lot of you probably have questions, like what's going to happen here at the church? What's the leadership going to be? What's the vision going to be? And those are questions that we're all asking. John's faith was so firmly entrenched in his healing that we did not have hardly any what-if conversations. For example, I did not know the password to his computer. He changed it and he didn't tell me. But with my kids and I, we played detective one night, and we got it figured out and got it changed to something that we will remember. So we're just asking that you have patience with us over the next couple weeks. The elders and I will be meeting together and sifting things out. But, you know, we're not in a hurry. God's kingdom is not dependent on us. We know that he goes on without us. and he can do everything without us. We are his agents, but he is alive and well and moving in our midst. And in that song that we were just singing about, he is good in the morning. We can sing it morning both ways, with the you in it and without the you in it. That God is good. And as I was reading in Exodus and Leviticus, gotta love Leviticus, as I was reading in those books, just this phrase, and I know I'd heard it before, but it just jumped out to me in such a new and fresh way, and I know it was God just preparing my heart, but it was the phrase, the bread of his presence. And it just spoke so loudly to my heart. And that's what I want to talk about today. When we had made up the June calendar for speaking, John was slotted to take Father's Day, and he was planning to speak that Sunday until just a few days before. And then I was slotted to take this week, and the elders offered to do it, but I said no. The Lord had already given me something for today, and I'm going to go ahead. And so we think about the bread, and we think about the first bread in the Bible that had huge significance. And that was as the Israelite children were wandering in the desert. God had brought them out of captivity, and he had pushed back the Red Sea, and he had brought them through on dry land, and he brought forth water out of a rock, and he did all these things. And they looked, and yet they would forget. And they would start to complain. You brought us out to this wilderness to kill us. Why, back in Egypt, we ate bread to the full and meat by the potful. Then God tells Moses, behold, I will rain bread from heaven for you. Send the people to go out and collect their daily portion. Don't save it. Trust me daily. I will provide all they need. And on the day before the Sabbath, you may gather a double portion, and it will not spoil, so you do not have to work to gather on the Sabbath. And the Lord said, they will see the bread, and they will know I am God. They will see the bread, and they will know I am God. And they called that bread manna. And the manna was like white, like coriander seed, and it tasted like wafers with honey. I mean, that doesn't sound too bad. So he told them to take an omer full, which I have no clue what an omer is, but enough, it would be enough to feed them for the day, to take an omer full of manna. But specifically, he said, I want you to take an omer full, and I want you to put it in a jar, and I want you to remember that the Lord has fed you faithfully in the wilderness. And it was that jar to be a testimony to the generations. It wasn't just supposed to be for the people that were, surviving on that manna right then. It was supposed to be something that would last for the ages, that they could look and say, do you remember when the Lord provided his presence, the bread of his presence? So they ate manna for 40 years. And when they complained about that diet and the boredom with manna, and that's where we could cue the Keith Green song. So you want to go back to Egypt, they had manna burgers and all of those different things. I love that song. God switched up their heavenly menu, and he brought quail in the evening. So they had manna in the morning and quail in the evening. God cared, God loved, God provided. So bread was an essential part of the food of the ancient Israelites. It was a symbolic thing. It wasn't just a sustenance, but it was symbolic of life and sweetness and sustenance. Bread also has a function of social bond. It's a symbol of hospitality and as a symbol of respect and concern. Melchizedek brought out water and wine and bread as a symbol and gesture of hospitality with Abram. Abram offered bread to the angels when they came by his tent to bring him that good news. Abigail brought out bread to David on behalf of her husband Nabal. And we know in that great movie, It's a Wonderful Life, that when they build their new house for the Santinis, that they are given bread and wine and salt. Bread played a key role in the consecration of the Aaronic priests. Bread was offered as an offering of thanksgiving, and it was a key element of Passover. The unleavened bread. Remember, they made the unleavened bread before they left the land, and because they had to leave so quickly, they didn't have time for bread to rise, so it was unleavened bread. And then even now, the Passover unleavened bread is a key part of the celebration of that festival. Bread is a symbol of God's provision. He is faithful. He will provide. The setting of the bread of the presence was a key piece of the temple's instructions. And so when God was telling them how the temple should be built and what it should look like, the table that would hold the bread of the presence was very specifically described. It was specific to measurement, to materials, and to appearance. The table was to be 2 cubits long and 1.5 cubits high. It was to be overlaid with pure gold and have a pure molding around it. And they were to put the bread of the presence on this table, and it was to be before the Lord at all times. That story, if you want to read it, is in Exodus 25, verses 23 to 30. And then in Leviticus, they talked more specifically about how that bread was to be made. Take fine flour and bake 12 loaves using 2/10, or if you're into fractions, 1/5 of an ephah for each loaf. And you were to set them in 2 rows, 6 in each row. So, you know me, I always have to have some kind of a prop. So I've got, and they laid out unleavened bread, but as Americans, we just tend to think of bread and think of more French loaves. And so, Maya, this isn't totally correct, but it's what we're doing for today. Faith, you want to come put my other loaves up for me? She's coming quicker. All right, you can just go ahead and lay them up, and if you need to, you can stack them. Guess how many there are. And so then they would stack them in 2 rows, which, because we're not using unleavened bread, we can't do this quite the way it says. 6 in each row on the table of gold. And this is our runner that we bought. John and the elders and I, we bought this runner in Israel. The one time that we made a trip all together, so that's special to me. Put 6 on each row on the table of gold, and along each row they put incense as a memorial to represent the bread and to be an offering. And they set it before the Lord regularly. Sabbath after Sabbath, as a lasting covenant, they set the showbread. Symbolically, again, they would remember what God did. They didn't put the bread out there saying, God, this is your bread to eat. But they were setting the bread out to say, God, we remember the bread that you provided. We remember your sustenance, your care, your nurture, your love, your watchful eye always being on us. and we're remembering to be thankful. We're so grateful for the provision of God. And then ultimately, it's Jesus who says, I am the bread that comes down from heaven in John 6:41. Jesus represents the very presence of God among his people on earth. Jesus said, I tell you the truth. It is not Moses who has given you the bread of heaven, but it is my Father who gives you the true bread of heaven. For the bread of God is he who comes from heaven and gives life to the world. The bread of his presence was set before the lamp. Literally, it translates to the bread of faces in the Hebrew. It is the face of God that Jesus is revealed. So in the bread itself, it's Jesus being revealed to us, our ultimate provision, that ultimate presence of God that comes through his Son. The presence of God was so important to John. I mean, it was his favorite. It was his favorite. I mean, that's why the tagline of the church is a place of his presence. John was a feeler. You know, I don't know if how many of you have studied out like the way people perceive God. You know, there's the feelers and the seers and the knowers and the hearers. And John was definitely a feeler. I mean, he would spend hours praying and worshiping, and he would spend time until he could feel the presence of the Lord on him. And I think I've shared that before because I never realized that, you know, we're all different in how we respond to the Father or feel him or whatever. And I'm more of a knower. And so as a knower, it was always odd to me that he could always feel so much or need to feel so much because I already knew it. And so that was a different thing. But John loved the presence of God. I mean, he would spend so much time. And, you know, when you talk about, should we, you know, make worship a little bit shorter for new people coming in? And he's like, no, we can't break. When we feel the, you know, he would always be feeling the presence. I know that you're all laughing and nodding because it's so true. It was just such a big thing to him. The presence of God was what he longed for. And now he's truly experiencing it, although much too soon. He would spend hours in prayer and meditation and worship just to feel that overwhelming presence of God, soaking him and saturating him. Zion, a place of his presence, a place where always the table is set. And you know, they always called it the showbread, and I always thought that was such an odd phrase to me, the showbread. I mean, I like the bread of his presence, but then I started getting this phrase, cue showbread. Like in the movies, you know, they'll say cue and then they cut to a certain scene. And it's like right now I felt like the Lord was saying to us is as we're sad or as we're questioning or as we're wondering, cue the showbread. See the bread, see the presence, see how he's providing, see how he's making a way. Show us the bread. Show us the bread. Show us your provision, Father. Show us how much you love us, how much you care for us. And so when I cued the showbread, this morning I was reading several scriptures, and many of them were John's favorites. Other ones are just ones that meant a lot to me this morning. But Psalm 27, verse 8. You have said, seek my face. My heart says to you, your face, Lord, I seek. Let's seek his face together. That's what's going to propel us forward, get us through this, is seeking the Father's face, being in his presence, enjoying the bread of his presence. In Jeremiah 29:13, you will seek me and find me. That's a promise. You will seek me and you will find me when you seek me with your whole heart. John gave it with his whole heart. And I know just from what some of you have shared, how much he inspired each of you to go after him in a new way of passion, and that it didn't have to look like anybody else's. It needs to be your own. Own your own. Own the way that you seek the Lord. Own the way that you feel close to him. Psalm 16:11. You make known to me the path of life, and in your presence there is fullness of joy, and at your right hand are pleasures forevermore. In the last couple weeks, John kept, you know how excited he was about our new house, and how it was to me too, but to him it was just like a whole nother level of, maybe because it was on a golf course. But he's like, God is so good, and he cares so much about me, and he loves me so much, and he's verses 4-5. Make me to know your ways, O God, and teach me your paths. Lead me in your truth and teach me. For you are the God of my salvation. For you I wait all the day long. One of my daughters shared that at his service on Friday. John was very content to just sit in his chair. In his office, it was his recliner, and at home he had another recliner, and he would sit and just be content to rest and to commune with the Father. And she shared, we can all get so busy, but to her it was a lesson. She said, sometimes I would look at him sitting in that chair and think, why don't you do something? But then she realized, no, it was a lesson to all of us that sometimes we need to get the Mary and just be willing to sit and be with him, to wait for him all day long. And in Exodus 33:14, my presence will go with you, and I will give you rest. And right now, that's the beauty of these scriptures, and of that to my heart about the bread of his presence, is that his presence is giving me rest. His presence is giving me peace. His presence is showering me with love. His presence is my comfort. His presence is my shield, my protection. When my mind starts to get troubled, he just settles on me with his amazing presence and his amazing peace. His continual peace is such a gift to us all. He is always with us. And just as he supplied food to the wandering Israelites, he is always providing and caring for us. Even when we don't know it, even when we don't acknowledge it, even when we're not truly appreciating it, like the children in the desert. There became many times where they just totally took for granted the Lord's provision. And it didn't have near the significance to them that it should. But his presence is always there, and it's always caring for us and watching for us. And as he highlighted that phrase, the bread of his presence, to me, I know he was showing me and causing me to count on the bread of life, Jesus, who would stick closer to me than a brother, that would be my source, my supply, my rest. He promised to be my strength and my joy. He promised to be my peace. He promises to be my all in all. His promise carries me, it quiets me, because he is good. And whenever I start to sink into the oceans of sadness, I say, cue the showbread. Show me the bread. Recount to me your goodness. Remind me of your provision. Show me his goodness. The bread of his presence feeds me and it restores me. I could see John this morning just standing there, like every Sunday, worshiping because he knew that his Father is always good. So here I had my 12 loaves, and those 12 loaves, obviously the 12 represented the 12 tribes of Israel, and then later on there's the 12 apostles. It was his presence to all the people. 12 loaves, 12 tribes, 12 apostles that went to all different places to teach about the Lord, to bring salvation. It was the presence to all the ends of the earth. In Psalm 22, verse 27, it says, all the ends of the earth shall remember and turn to the Lord, and all the families of the nation shall worship before you. The bread of his presence. And we can remember and think of the bread, and we think of, the children of Israel and all of that, but I just have been really thinking a lot about the I want you to find someone to give your loaf to. You carry the presence, the bread of the presence, and I want you to minister out the presence of the Father. Show the bread. Show the Father's great love. Christina, I want you to take one for sure and give it out to someone. It could be a homeless person on the side of the road or whatever. They are mostly all still sealed up. I did not take them out of the wrappers just because of, I didn't want to make people freak out about getting food. And so, but I just today as an act of just remembering and being thankful for God's wonderful presence, the bread of his presence that sustains us, that causes us to be thankful and to reflect. I want his presence to be sent out into the world. And that's really, I don't have a lot more than that to say today, other than that's what will get us all through this season, is to cue the showbread, to remember the bread of his presence that will minister to each of us individually, that will minister to us corporately, that will cause us to remember, and then also just knowing that the word presence was such a huge part of John's experience with the Father, that it will be a tribute to him as well. So Father, we thank you for your amazing presence that always surrounds us, that is with us in times when we feel it tangibly, and it's around us even when we don't feel it. Lord, you are so good to us. You are our all in all. You are our Father. You care for us each as one of your children. You love us abundantly more than we can ever understand. We are thankful for all the things that you do to care for us and to take care of us. And Father, even when we have questions, like Talena said, when we are asking the whys, Lord, cause us to just stay steady and remain focused on you and your love for us and the joy that there is in your presence. We delight in you. We delight in you. We lean into you. You are our tower of strength. We worship you and I love you, Lord. Amen.
Thank you, Chris. I just love how she was just sharing about, just the differences between her and John. And I think that it's so easy in sports how we can see how people bring different things and how they come together, but then outside of sports we can tend to resent when people don't act the same way we do, see things the same way we do, or it's a lot easier just to resent it and just to wish people were just more like ourselves. But that, God, by design, God has made us all different, and that the beauty is when we come together and we bring what God has put on our hearts and what he is speaking to us, and seeing that expression come out of the church and be a light and a life to the rest of the community. And I just want to honor Chris for just your heart and what you carry, and just seeing in Johnny and Isaiah and the family of just, it's so easy going through a hard time. It can be easy as leaders just to I want to just focus on what's going on, but that you guys continue to bring your expression even through the difficult times and modeling what it is to walk that out to the rest of us, because church isn't just on Sunday, folks. It's what happens in the middle of the week too, and God is with us and working through us. And so I just want you guys to be encouraged, and just we love you guys, and we will have ministry people up here to pray with you and intercede with you in whatever you're needing. And just wish you guys a great week.